Hello again. We just got done looking at how to create a frequency distribution and a relative frequency distribution, but now we're going to take that information and try to put it into more of a visual diagram of sorts. So we have a couple of options for that we're going to go through. So a way to interpret a frequency distribution more easily is by viewing a histogram or a frequency polygon. Note, histograms must have touching bars and frequency polygons must be closed. So remember what closed means from chapter 9. So here's a couple of visuals to look at. So you can see all the bars are touching each other. Very important for a histogram. Don't confuse it with a bar graph. Bar graphs have spaces between those bars, but histograms do not. So you have the different values across the bottom, and you have the frequency along the side. Frequency polygons, you can see, are kind of similar, but they're more of like a line graph. So again, you have the data, the individual data values across the bottom, and then you have the frequencies along the side. And you can see how it gets closed by connecting that first data value down to the axis across the bottom, that horizontal axis. Same idea on the other end. So it's got to be closed, otherwise it's just a floating line and it's not a polygon. So let's create one of these each for our previous problem. So we have that information right there, so we should be able to knock this out pretty quickly. So we have our blank slates here, and you can see that there are some lines in here, kind of hard to see, but it's just in there just enough to help guide you when you draw these by hand. So the big thing to remember is that with a histogram, we like to have the spaces labeled. So we had a 0, a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, and a 5. So those were our individual data values. Now we should label this. Now I think these were just summer activities, so we'll just call it activities for short. And then across on the vertical side, we want to make sure we have a high enough frequency. Now remember, our highest frequency in this case was 10. So we want to make sure we get up to 10 at least. Now, depending on how many spaces we have, we might have to scale it. So let's count how many spaces we have. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we only have 8, so we can't say a one-to-one relationship. We're going to have to scale it up. So in this case, because there's only 8 boxes, if we double the size, that would get us up to 16. So that should be good. So if we go by 2s, we should be okay. Now we don't need to go all the way up. So we have our frequency on the vertical side. Now all that's left to do is just to draw those bars. So first bar goes up to 10. Not too bad. Second one is going to go up to 7. So we want to be halfway in between. Next one goes up to 6. Next one is 4. Next is 2. And last but not least is 1. And there's our histogram. Not too bad, hopefully. Now, what's nice about the frequency polygons, and I'll move it over so I'm not in the way, is that a lot of it's going to be the same, but be careful about labeling the bottom. And now we don't want to label the spaces like we did over here on the histogram. We want to label the actual lines. So the first line, we don't want to start right underneath the vertical axis, and you'll see why in a second. So we always want to skip over to the first one and label from there. So there's our individual values, and again we have our activities, and then we have our vertical axis, which again we're still going to go by 2s. And so now, instead of drawing bars though, we want to just plot points. So above the 0 and across from the 10, we'll put a dot. Across from the 1, we want to get up to 7. 2, we want to get across from the 6. 3 across from the 4. 4 across from the 2. And 5 is across from 1. So there's our dots. Now we want to connect the dots. So if you are not a great drawer, probably wise to get a ruler or some sort of straight edge. Now, again, so there's our floating line, and it's not perfect, but you get the idea, hopefully. But now the last step is to close it. So we want to make sure we go from the first dot and we want to drop it. I like to drop it right through where the two axes cross. That's probably the easiest spot to connect to. Over here, if you have an extra, row of spaces, again, I'd like to just go down through the axis like that. And if you extend it beyond, that's not a big deal. But again, the whole shape is now closed, and so now it is a frequency polygon. So that is a quick tutorial on that. So we're going to see how we can have other types of graphs with a little bit of variance in how the values are identified in the next video. So see you soon.